A story now for this Remembrance Day. It's about a bloke whom history has pretty much forgotten. Have you ever heard of Roderick Stanley Dallas? Probably not. But he is perhaps this country's greatest ever flying ace, an Aussie Red Baron.
It's hard to put into a few words a man that was just so much to so many people. He was a great Australian.
Roderick Stanley Dallas is an Australian war hero who has slipped through the cracks of time. But aviation historian Adrian Hellwig is trying to change that.
He managed to get 50 victories over enemy airmen, so that puts him amongst the leading aces of the world.
Stan, as he liked to be known, had gone to England after the outbreak of war to join the Royal Naval Air Service. And as he recorded in his logbook, now housed in the Queensland Museum, this young Aussie fought against the best of them in the skies over Europe.
Had a scrap and destroyed a Hun. Perhaps the one with the red tail who would insist on shooting on me from below was the Baron himself.
The Red Baron?
That's the one.
Would have Dallas been our Red Baron?
I think you could safely say, as our ace of aces, that he'd be our Red Baron.
But then, at just 26 years of age, Dallas was killed in 1918 while trying to protect a mate.
He saw an Allied airman in trouble. He also saw 3 German triplanes waiting in the sun. He had to make a choice, either put himself at risk or let the Allied airmen, who obviously hadn't seen the other 3 triplanes, die. Dallas wasn't the sort of man to let a companion, a comrade in arms, die.
Dallas himself may have died, but his reputation didn't.
Stanley Dallas was to me a quite outstanding character and perhaps the greatest of Australia's World War I fighter pilots.
Why isn't this man better known by all Australians?
Good question. We say every Remembrance Day, lest we forget. And I guess sometimes it narks me that he is Australia's greatest air ace of all time, and yes, we have forgotten him.
Part of the problem, Adrian says, is how Dallas is listed in the records. He may have been in a British uniform, but Dallas's letters home to Queensland showed where his heart lay.
Australia, for good Australians, is good enough for me.
But on the Commonwealth War Graves Commission website, his nationality is listed as United Kingdom, because that was the origin of the force he served with.
As the case of Dallas shows, we have trouble enough remembering our war heroes at times. If someone goes on to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission and stumbles across the Dallas site, not only do they not know he was one of Australia's greatest war heroes, they don't even know he was Australian. And I think that's a great shame.
Adrian has requested that the Australian government help write the past, but he's got nowhere.
And when we're talking about a national hero, or someone who should be a national hero, our ace of aces, and the Australian government's not even prepared to make representation to the British Royal Air Force and say, come on, how about it?
We should recognise for posterity and for history that he was an Australian. He was an Australian air ace.
Rusty Priest is a former state president of the RSL. He's joining forces with Adrian to contact the federal government and urge them to lobby the British.
I would go so far as to say that our Prime Minister should talk to their Prime Minister and say, listen, a wrong should be righted, even though the wrong is technically correct.
Because I fly World War I model aircraft, it takes me back to that era when people like Stan were actually up there.
It may be almost 90 years since Dallas was in his last dogfight, but Adrian Hellwig will continue the battle for the air ace's name, nationality and rank to be recognised. A battle for a man he never knew, but will always admire.
He'd probably say, don't bother, what's all the fuss about? But I'd have to say, Stan, I'm sorry, I don't think that's good enough. We've got to fix this up.
Lovely story. Scott Bevan there on one of our unsung Aussie heroes, a real swashbuckler, wasn't he? And Veterans Affairs tells us that because Major Dallas flew with the RAF, not the RAAF, strictly speaking, it is correct to list him as being from the United Kingdom.